Hi, I'm Miss Katie, and I'm going to be doing week 2 of the online drawing class. The assignment today is to work with objects from nature, and that's different than what we did last week, which was man-made objects. So things that have curvilinear shapes, things that are not as predictable as something man-made that would be symmetrical. So choose your elements so that when you draw them, they feel like there's something that is a little different than the things we did last week. So what we'll be drawing today is a still life of natural objects. Mine includes some onions, some potatoes, and some jalapeno peppers. But you don't have to use those things. You could use a potted plant. You could use something that you found outside and brought in, like a maple branch or something that's growing in your garden. The goal today is to work with even more values than you were able to work with last time. So we'll be trying to expand 3 values into 5 values, and we'll be trying to work with highlights and deep shadows. We're going to be using a number 2 pencil, which is easy to erase. It's nice and light. And that will be the first layer. Then, if you need to erase anything, you'll be using your pink pearl eraser. And after you're satisfied with the arrangement of elements on the page, that's when you use your ebony pencil. And you can use that for shading, dark shadows, bringing the dark from the background all the way up to the edge of the foreground. And then if you want to use either your finger or a blending stump, it's also called a smudge stick, to rub the 2 different kinds of graphite into the surface of the paper, that will help blend it into a smooth surface. And don't forget, you need the sharpener in case you need to sharpen either of those pencils, because sometimes it's very tiny detailed work, and it's useful to have a sharp point. Now, the 3 largest things in my still life are the 3 onions. I'm going to draw those first. They're overlapping a little bit. And then this sort of just touches the one next to it. But after I've drawn those shapes, I have to note the angle that each onion is at. So I'm putting this larger sort of diagonal one at this angle. This one is kind of like that angle. And then this one is pretty much straight up and down and a little bit wider at the bottom. And you should look at the character of each of the onions to see whether or not it's wider at the bottom, wider at the top. After that, I noticed the negative space. The negative space around my onions is almost as important as the onions themselves. And so here, I end this onion a little higher so that this space right here is deeper. Here, I've got potato number 1 covering up the bottom of that onion. Potato number 2 Now in the end, they won't be that dark, so I can lighten them with my erasing here and here. This one, again, the line is diagonal. And so when they start going out, they go out from that center point. And that's sort of just the surface of most onions. You can see that surface, and it starts to come around. You can fill in ones in between if you decide you need them later. Each one of your onions also has a dark side and a light side. I'm going to lighten these lines for a minute before I put the dark side and the light side. Because of the lamp coming in from the side, I have a shape of highlight in the top portion there. I'm also going to see a little bit of the dark brown come around like that. So that will be pigmented darker. This will be pigmented lighter. And my highlights are going to be along this edge of the light. I'm making marks here to remind me that there are highlights over there, just like there's a highlight right here. And a highlight right along here. The shadow, which happens on the outside, the far side of this onion, you can start with your pencil, your number 2 pencil, just to remind you where you're going to be looking for shadow. Here. It sort of stops right here. And then the underside is primarily where I'm seeing shadow, here, underneath. And that's going to happen on our light and our dark objects too. So here I am making marks to describe shadow. I also have to keep in mind that there are going to be cast shadows. And the important thing to note is that the light side that's coming, the light which is coming from the, this side, is going to create lights in each of the potatoes as well. Sometimes it'll be up at the edge, and sometimes it'll be closer to where the dark begins. So that's the line part of the drawing. And I squint my eye and I see whether or not it looks like I've gotten all of the darks. I think there are going to be some darks down around here. Now before I use my blending stump, I'm going to clean up the lines a little bit. So the dark edge, it's not 3 or 4 lines, it's 1 line. And then see how dark my shadow needs to be. I'm using my blending stump right underneath. There should be a very dark underside here. Most of the underside of the peppers are so dark, they stand in for the darkest thing in the whole composition. I'm working all the way around the highlights, so we see the highlights when I'm done. It's gradually lighter as it comes up the side into the light. I'm going to turn this upside down because in some cases it's easier to do the curvature of the line from the opposite direction. Now the far onion is going to be the one that has the largest amount of dark. So my surface, that's the table, will be darker than the onions, but lighter than jalapeno peppers. And so that's when you want to do a gradation. You push down harder up here, or you go over it more times. And then as you make your way down to the pepper, it gets lighter. And finally, I'll just do 2 of the potatoes because I want to give you an opportunity to do your piece. Pushing down a little bit harder in the area where there's shadow. So you guys can take it from here, but here's my picture, just a little bit more resolved. So it's time to get started.